Hi everybody, present day Travis here, and I just want to say that this video that I'm about to put in front of this video is a video I recorded a couple of weeks ago. I was ready to discard it. I wasn't really sure if I really stood by the content in it as strongly as I did. I was going to just toss it, but I hadn't edited it or anything yet. And then I came upon some problems with my video editing software in the last couple videos I tried to do, so I figured giving this video a second chance is a good and easy way for me to maybe work on some new video editing. I've got some new software to try out, so we'll do that, and this is a good way for me to do it without filming too much in the way of new video. So if it works, I'd like to thank Ian from Rhyme Signatures for the suggestion for new software, and if it doesn't work, this video will never see the light of day, and, well, you tried. Also, as I just said, I wasn't sure if I stood 100% by the choices I made in this video, so I'm cutting in a new choice for one of the albums that I'm talking about in this video because I've had some time to reflect. I realize that there's an album I like better than an album on this list that definitely fits the bill a lot better, so I'm going to include that in here as well. So that'll be recorded today. Hello everyone! So there's been a few folks in my prog rock community that have recently done videos about their top non-progressive albums, and I kind of wanted to do the same thing myself, but I figured that I grew up on a lot of non-prog, including, a lot of classic rock from the likes of Led Zeppelin to Cheap Trick to Kiss, all the way to like modern grunge and nu metal from Metallica, Nirvana, Soundgarden, Korn, Evanescence, Limp Bizkit. It would be really easy for me to make a list of my top non-progressive albums just on the basis that that's a big component of the music I listen to. I don't exclusively listen to prog rock. So I thought I would do one better and actually list my top 5 non-rock albums. Now, there is a bit of a problem with trying to delineate where rock ends and, say, pop or jazz or whatever begins, and I'm just going to say that my criteria for these records is that rock isn't the main determining factor in these artists or in the albums that I'm particularly showing off. There may be some rock tunes on these albums. Here and there might be some rock influences, but these are not exclusively rock albums, and rock is only a small portion of the factor of the record, if at all. These are considered to be outside of the rock genre entirely. And for the first of the 5 records that I'm going to be talking about today, I'm going to go with an artist that is kind of accepted by a lot of rock and metal fans as being something that's very acceptable for us rock and metal fans to listen to despite it not being a part of the rock genre, and that is ABBA with their 1976 album, A Rival. So with A Rival, I find that ABBA started their sort of ascent into pop glory. This is the start of sort of a 5-album run that spans to the end of their main career in the 80s, and this is really the album that I think really kicked off, like, just the international love of this band. Of course, you have the song Dancing Queen, which is just their most recognizable hit, their big #1, the song everybody knows from them. But you also have tracks like Knowing Me, Knowing You, Money, 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 which is a personal favorite of mine. I think that there's also some really good sort of deeper cuts on this record. The title track is a sort of instrumental track that's sort of in the style that would be fitting of an artist like Mike Oldfield. Actually, he covered that song, so it kind of speaks for itself. But yeah, this is just one of those albums where it really kicked off a lot of ABBA's big hit-making days, and without tracks like Dancing Queen and Knowing Me, Knowing You, they might not have been put on the map so quickly. And for me, I really like this album. This is one of the ABBA records I can really just put on and enjoy front to back every time. Now, staying entirely within the pop genre, I wanted to go for something that was a little more on the opposite end of the spectrum from, a classic 70s pop record to something that's a little bit more current, a little more electronic, a little more focused on that sort of Generation Z approach, and that is Aurora's The Gods We Can Touch. I just really love Aurora's approach to modern pop. Of course, she is a songwriter in her own rights. Like, a lot of the tracks on these albums, of all of her albums, are either written mostly just by her and her partner, Magnus Skilstad. And there's not really a whole lot of other, outside songwriters with her music. She's very much in creative control of her music. And the songs themselves is just a really good mix of ambient, folk. There is a little bit of, rock influence here and there, some jazz. Of course, a lot of electronic influence. Her voice is very interesting, and just the songwriting is really on point. There's a lot of really great songs on this record. A Dangerous Thing, The Innocent, and Blood in the Wine in particular are some of my favorites from this record. But this is one of those few sort of modern pop albums that sort of demands a listen from front to back, which is really something you can't say about a lot of modern pop albums nowadays, where you have a couple of good singles and a lot of throwaway deep cuts. This is one of those albums where every song is really just as good as the last one. And she's just got such a unique persona, presence, and voice. It's really hard to single out one song and say this is the one you should be listening to. But pretty much all of these are just great examples of modern sort of production and that sort of Nordic pop aesthetic. It's maybe a little Gen Z for a lot of people's tastes, but I do really enjoy this record. Alright, so another album for this list is actually not really a traditional album. It is a soundtrack for the anime series Higurashi Renmay. Now, it's not a rock album, and I'm not really sure what genre you would call this. It has elements of folk music, jazz, classical, even a little bit of avant-garde music, Celtic music. It's got some world music elements to it. Very acoustic driven, lots of acoustic guitars, acoustic pianos, folk instruments, flutes, violins, cellos. It's definitely got some character to it that suggests it really is meant to be sort of a soundtrack album. And it's very different from other anime soundtracks on its own, just in that there aren't really any pop anthems on here. A lot of anime series kind of have these big pop rock tunes for their intro, and we only really get 2 vocal tracks on this entire record. One is a very traditional sounding jazz tune called Love Will Light the Way, and then you've got a track called Wondering, which is this very earthy Celtic kind of vibe. I could see fans of maybe prog bands like Renaissance being into this. And then, a lot of really good instrumental work that's, like I said, it kind of straddles this line between Celtic folk and jazzy with classical elements kind of music, very soundtracky kind of music. This is all composed by Ko Otani, and Higurashi Renmay is just easily one of my favorite anime series of all time. It's a little bit different, it's a little more cryptic, there's a lot of emotional and religious symbolism in the anime, but nothing that really beats you over the head with a particular belief set. It's just a really interesting anime, very short, very emotional, probably not one I would say should be your first anime to check out if you've never watched anime, but easy to see why. If you're a prog head, you might get a kick out of it. And yeah, the soundtrack is absolutely amazing. Just really good music for, relaxation, but also just good music to listen to on its own. There's just so much really good instrumental playing on this record. None of it's like in the guitar solo, shreddy rock kind of sense, but you really get this idea that they're trying to set a mood and a vibe with this, and that's pretty much like what the best soundtrack can do. And shifting gears musically once again, I'm going to go for my fourth album with a live album from 1987 by an artist whose genre I have an incredibly difficult time pinning down, and that is Michael Hedges, live on the Double Planet. Hedges' music really toes a few lines for me because you can't really fit him into, the pop sphere of things because his music is very complex. But at the same time, he's not a folk artist, despite most of his music being all acoustic guitar and voice. It's not new age. It's influenced by world music, but it isn't exclusively world music. It's just kind of its own thing. There's a lot of really interesting use of technique, particularly with the instrumental tracks, where there's a lot of stuff that you expect more from shred guitarists, like tapping, even some stuff that's very ahead of its time in terms of like slap guitar, harp harmonics. He uses a harp guitar on a couple of tracks, including Because It's There, which is kind of a signature track for him. There are covers on this record, like All Along the Watchtower by Bob Dylan and Prince's A Love Bizarre. Just really good renditions of these tracks, and some really good original songs like Ready or Not, which I first discovered through a friend of mine, Kevin Kloss, who records music here in my hometown, and he's got a pretty extensive catalog of albums himself, a lot of them very much influenced by Hedges' work. And he did a cover of Ready or Not on one of his early records. Just some of the greatest instrumental acoustic tracks I can think of, like Silent Anticipations, such a wonderful exploration of the acoustic guitar. I mean, Michael Hedges did with the acoustic guitar things that you can't do on an electric, and better than you could do on an electric. And for me, his songwriting was also just on point. It wasn't all about technique. He did use a lot of alternate tunings, and his songwriting was just very quirky and very individualistic. I really think Michael Hedges' Live on the Double Planet is probably my favorite non-rock album of all time. There's just so much wonderful music on this record. Some of it you can easily put on in the background and just enjoy, but some of it you can really dig in and get a better grip on for even just like the singer-songwriter stuff. Some really excellent music on this record. Finally, we get to my fifth album on this list, and I kind of promised myself I wasn't going to do any albums that were non-rock by artists that are known for rock music. But I think it would almost be a little insulting to consider this artist's repertoire to be entirely rock, because his output through his lifetime was just so diverse. You could go to just about any point in his career and find something way outside of the rock genre. So I don't really consider him to be a rock artist in total. He's just an artist in every aspect of music that he can get his hands on, and I'm talking about the final album released during the lifetime of Frank Zappa, and that is The Yellow Shark. This is an orchestral record that I wouldn't say it's a full-on orchestra. He uses the Ensemble Moderne, which is kind of a weird mishmash of modern orchestral ensemble with classic orchestra. But the songs that are on this record, there's a good mix of sort of covers of older material like Uncle Meat, the Dog Breath Variations, Bebop Tango, and then some newer pieces like Outrage at Valdez, the Times Beach trilogy, I guess you would call it, even though there's no part one on this record. And even a couple of like humorous pieces that still showcase Frank's really both political but also satirical sense of humor, like Food Gathering in Post-Industrial America 1992 and Welcome to the United States, which is an exuberant reading of an immigration form set to music. It's funnier than it sounds, trust me. And just some really excellent playing from the ensemble all around. I mean, it's very much in like the wheelhouse of composers like Stravinsky, Edgar Varese. If you're really into that, you'll probably dig this. If your ideal classical music is Beethoven and Mozart, you might not get as much of a kick out of this. There is one track on this album that also just deserves a really good shout out because it's one of his older pieces that he composed on a keyboard called the synclavier, an old sort of sequencer mixed with a keyboard, mixed with a MIDI sort of controller. And it's called G-Spot Tornado, and it was written specifically to be unplayable by human beings. And it is presented here entirely played by an orchestral ensemble, by hand, on stage, in real time. It's just a real testament to how good these musicians are that they picked a piece of music that was specifically written to be unplayable by human beings and pulled it off perfectly. That makes this one of my top 5 non-rock albums of all time. There you go. That's it. These albums are not rock albums. You're not going to hear a lot of shredding guitar solos and big meaty riffs. There's not really a lot of big wailing Robert Plant-esque vocals. These are very diverse and different albums that maybe if you're not really big on exploring outside of rock, these are probably albums you might enjoy, because I really don't do a lot of exploring outside of the rock genre myself, and yet I found these albums to be really entertaining and really enjoyable to listen to, and I think you should listen to them too. Anyway, this has been Long Words on Song Words. Out.